Hello friends, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I am Katrina and today we're going to be discussing how to fertilize your vegetable garden. Fertilizing your garden is a crucial step in ensuring that your plants grow healthy and produce a very large harvest, especially here in Florida where we do have some challenges with our soil. So in this video we'll be covering how much fertilizer to use, how often to fertilize, and the different kinds of organic fertilizers that you can use. Let's start by discussing how much fertilizer to use. The amount of fertilizer you use will depend on the size of your garden and the types of fertilizer you are choosing. Generally, it's recommended to use about 1 to 2 pounds of fertilizer per 100 square feet of garden space. This should be applied evenly across the garden to ensure that all plants receive the same amount of nutrients. So, for example, I have an 8 by 4 foot bed here. To figure out the square footage of this bed, you simply multiply those two numbers. So this bed is 32 square feet. My package of tomato tone right here, which I use pretty much as a general fertilizer in my garden, says to spread 3 pounds, which equals about 9 cups to 50 square feet of newly planted beds. So just doing some easy math here, one bed is 32 square feet, so double that would be 64 square feet for 2 beds, which is close enough. So that means 9 cups for 2 beds, or 4.5 cups per bed. If you're using a liquid fertilizer like my favorite, Neptune's Harvest Fish Fertilizer, mix 1 ounce with a gallon of water, and then I usually spread that over one whole bed. Another option is just to place fertilizer in your planting holes when you're transplanting seedlings. A perfect example of this is when you're transplanting your tomatoes. When they're ready to go in their forever homes, in their beds or in ground, I grab a good handful of tomato tone, which is probably about 1/3 of a cup, and I drop it into the hole before I put the seedling in. Either one of these methods will work for fertilizing your garden. Now let's talk about how often to fertilize. Most vegetable gardens will need to be fertilized every 4 to 6 weeks throughout the growing season. I usually do a big feed of the 4.5 cups per bed at the start of spring and fall gardening when my beds are completely empty, and then I rake it in and water it really well. I also usually add some mulch like grass clippings or dead leaves on top just to make sure that the wind doesn't blow away all of that good stuff. After that, I normally switch to a liquid fertilizer for the remainder of the growing season, and I use that anywhere from once a week to once a month. And this depends on which type of liquid fertilizer I'm using and the type of plants I'm growing. Green vegetables like broccoli and lettuce, I usually use diluted urine, which is super high in nitrogen, so I only fertilize with that once a month. But if I have something like tomatoes or cucumbers, I'll fertilize that with the fish fertilizer every 2 weeks. I prefer fish fertilizer for these fruiting plants because too much nitrogen can reduce the fruit yield on these kinds of plants. It'll give you lots of green growth, but not a lot of fruit. It's also important to monitor your plants and soil to determine if they need more frequent fertilization. If your plants are showing signs of nutrient deficiencies such as yellowing leaves or stunted growth, you may need to fertilize more often. This is especially true for brand new beds where lots of organic material was used, or if the soil that was put in had kind of poor nutritional value, since that will eat up the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium much quicker than an established bed where you've added things like compost and organic mulch. If you are finding this video helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button. The more likes this video gets, the more it will be shown to other gardeners. And my passion is to help people grow more of their own food in their own backyard because it's such a healthy hobby for our minds, our bodies, and our souls, and I would absolutely love it if more people took up gardening. Now let's move on to the different kinds of organic fertilizer that you can use in your vegetable garden. I've mentioned a few already, but I want to deep dive into each of them. Organic fertilizers are derived from natural sources and are a great way to improve the health of your soil, which in turn helps your plants. The first most common one, and probably the best one that you can give to your garden, is compost. Compost is a mixture of organic material that's been broken down into a rich, nutrient-dense soil amendment. It's a great way to add organic matter to your soil and improve your soil structure. I do this in my own garden using these compost tumblers. I add veggie scraps, grass clippings, and plant debris from the garden, which is what makes up the green material. I then add brown material like shredded paper wood chips, sawdust, dead leaves, and my Amazon cardboard packages. If you want to know more about how to start composting, I'm going to add my lazy compost video up here and down in the description, so make sure to check that out. Next up is manure from cows, horses, chickens, rabbits, and other animals. These are great sources of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are essential nutrients for plant growth. If you don't have access to somebody with these types of animals, you can buy the bagged, aged manure from the big box stores, or you could reach out to your farms nearby and ask if they'd be willing to give you some. You don't need a lot of this stuff since it is super concentrated, 1 to 2 inches at most. And trust me, the local farmers are not going to find your question weird. They're probably very used to it. Bone, blood, and kelp meal are amendments that act as fertilizers in the garden. This one right here, bone meal, is made from ground up bones of animals and is a really great source of phosphorus, which is important for root development and overall plant health. Blood meal is made from dried animal blood and is a good source of nitrogen, which is important for leafy growth. So think of your greens. And then that last one is kelp meal. It is dried kelp from the ocean and is a good source of potassium, which is important for water uptake and improved photosynthesis, which is how the plants use the sun to convert carbon dioxide and water into food for the plant. Sorry for the science lesson. Next up is fish emulsion or fish fertilizer. Fish emulsion is made up from ground up fish. It is a good source of nitrogen, which we discussed earlier is important for that green leafy growth. The next one is worm castings, which are the excrement or poop of, I think, earthworms normally. It's a type of manure fertilizer, but unlike the other fertilizers and manures we talked about, this one is very hard to overdo. So you don't have to be as precise. And it's something that you could make at home if you wanted to build a worm bin. And last but certainly not least is urine. Urine is a great source of all 3 key ingredients of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as lots and lots of minerals. It tends to be much higher in nitrogen, so you want to dilute the urine with water at least a 10-to-1 ratio. A couple other things you should know about urine as a fertilizer is that it is best to age it a little bit, which simply means you need to allow it to sit after you collect it. Second, you would be best collecting urine for somebody in your household that is not taking any kind of medication, although I have seen some recent studies that showed that the level of medications in urine are absorbed by the plant at a very, very tiny amount that is statistically insignificant. But that has not had a large enough study yet, so it's best to stick to this rule. Fertilizing your vegetable garden is an important step in ensuring that your plants grow healthy and produce a very large harvest. As you can see from some of our examples today, gardens take a pretty good amount of fertilizer to have the best outcome. By using the right amount of fertilizer, fertilizing at the right time, and choosing the right kind of organic fertilizers, you can improve the health of your soil and produce a successful vegetable garden. If you're struggling with your vegetable garden, with its yield or with its health, other things that can complicate it or cause problems is a lack of water. So make sure to watch this video next. It's all about watering your garden. Happy gardening, guys.